name is Brian O'Neill, Supervising Location Manager of Mare of Easttown for the HBO network. I am zooming in here today from Copley Square in the heart of Halston.
Hi, my name is Matt Palmer. I am the location manager from The Stand, and I'm zooming in from Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Hi, I'm Chris Britton. I am a location manager for Halston, and I'm zooming in from New York City.
I am Alison Taylor. I'm the location manager for the Underground Railroad, and I am zooming in from Los Angeles, California.
I'm Angie Morrison, and I was a location scout on the Underground Railroad, zooming in from Atlanta.
Hello, I'm David Pieper from Germany as a location manager of Queen's Gambit. Happy to be here.
3, 2, 1. Hi, I'm Meredith Hodder from Whistler, British Columbia, Canada, and I'm the moderator for the Anthology Limited Series panel for the LMGI Awards. So we'll get right to it with the first question. The locations of Mare of Easttown are so authentic, and they really set the tone and atmosphere for the show. Was that a conscious effort to kind of be true to the story, to find these locations rather than they just being kind of picturesque?
Absolutely. The number one and the main character of the show is Easttown. I know Kate Winslet will take front billing, but it's Mare of Easttown with Kate Winslet, and no due respect to Kate. If we didn't get the town right, none of the characters would be plausible. The story really doesn't work. You won't have the connection, emotional connections to each and all of the characters. So we spent quite a bit of time trying to create a fictitious version. Maybe we took some cinematic license and maybe pushing it a little bit to really drive home the point. You know, it being a working class town that has seen better days, it's been hit hard with various societal strains, from the opioid addiction to lack of steel mills closing, lack of employment, and frankly, just a really sense of despair and a lack of hope. And Mare's character takes on the burden of trying to keep the community safe and provide whatever bit of hope throughout all the trying times. Meanwhile, her life is crumbling personally around her. So yeah, we didn't look for anything shiny or pretty. The level of grit and patina that we were after was not something we're typically searching for in location management.
Yeah, you guys did a really good job, I felt, of creating this small kind of working class town with all the locations. Like, it was, I think it's kind of lost in that.
It's a town that, you know, we called it Easttown, but it really is anywhere USA. I mean, short of the accents that were very much Delaware County, Delco as it's known, outside Philadelphia. But this story exists throughout this country, and you know, for the most part, film and entertainment, and television, etc. We focus on the, you know, we don't oftentimes come and highlight what so many people, and I almost say the vast majority of Americans are living, and not only in America, I think it transcends internationally, in the sense that, you know, most people are having, life isn't pretty. Life isn't always packaged up with a bow, and yet we have to keep going on. And that's basically Mare's story: how to keep going on when it feels impossible to even figure out what the next step is. Which was a fun task and challenge to put together that sort of I don't know the word I'm looking for, but that sort of portfolio of locations that would help tell that story.
Yeah, you guys did a great job. And you guys were filming in small towns in Philadelphia. And what were some of the rewards and challenges of filming in a small town?
Well, I mean, a lot of the towns, boroughs, communities, commonwealths, whatever they may be called, had never had filming at all. some have, and Philadelphia, of course, but we were more in the surrounding 5 counties than in Philadelphia proper. And it meant going, some of the challenges were just explaining to the mayor, to city council, presenting and meeting with city council, the fire, or the police, not even knowing what the process was, and being somewhat blunt that it isn't going to be a few guys in a camera. It's going to be a circus with tents and animals and the like. But we, for the most part, were welcomed with open arms, and we tried to include them and explain to them that Hollywood may have overlooked your community in the past, but we're here to really show what's here and how valid the individuals in that community are to our society as a whole, and we're trying to tell the story.
Well, thanks, Brian. That's really interesting, and you guys did a fantastic job with that show. So good luck to you on your new project, and good luck in this season's award.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, we will move along to Chris for Halston. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing well, thank you. I grew up in Delco, so big fan of Mare of Easttown. Great portrayal.
See, we're all interconnected, even though we're all over the world. Yeah, so Halston, another fantastic show. I think I watched it in, it's shame to admit, one night. It was just such a fascinating look into his life. And I just got lost in his office and New York City and just that time and place. So fantastic job, Chris. Can you talk to us a little bit about obtaining permission to shoot in some of these iconic places in New York City, like Central Park, the Park Hotel, and the logistics? I think in New York or any kind of big city, sometimes, our circuses these days are bigger due to COVID and other things. And New York just doesn't have parking lots to park those things. Like,
Sure.
What are some of the logistics and challenges of filming in New York City?
Yeah, absolutely. So our series started before the pandemic, and we, of course, took a hiatus and then came back in. And when we returned, we began our shoot actually with working with the Central Park Conservancy, who's always been very film friendly. But we were actually the first production to even be able to come in and bring all of our equipment and our trucks and crew to be able to film on such great places like the Bow Bridge, which overlooks Central Park South, or Literary Walk, or the Mall. So for us, the challenges of shooting a period piece in New York City, a lot of the permitting restrictions were rolled forward. We could only take a single side of any street when filming. So I know a lot of times the believability of a period piece is being able to follow a character around a corner, across a street, through multiple period picture cars. We had to think more creatively on how to accomplish that with the smaller scope for our whole show. But I will say that the Mayor's Office of Film and Television and the New York State Governor's Office were very supportive with our series, and we were able to accomplish it in a way that I feel like our director and production designer were very proud of. I feel like certain elements of Halston's life are very iconic and well known, like Studio 54 or Andy Warhol's fishing compound. But there's a lot of locations in his life that aren't as well photographed, or we sort of had to do a lot of research to dig through. So in finding great period locations, we did have to check in with the city a lot more than we normally do, and appeal for a lot of locations because they were pretty much the ones that would work best to tell his story.
So fascinating, yeah. And then one of the things that you guys went to Paris, I should say, in the TV series, but you were still in New York. How did you recreate Paris in New York?
I think when we first started pre-production, there was sort of this loose conversation of actually going to Paris, and everyone just assumed, like, of course, we're going to get these scenes there. Thankfully, the scenes that we did at the Palace of Versailles are not the typical tour locations that you would go and visiting the palace. We were recreating the Opera House and some of the other more rundown areas of it. but we were able to piece together through 3 different locations. There was a theater in Jersey City with a great Baroque lobby. There's a mansion up in Yonkers, New York, which we did sort of for the exterior, the hallways and the corridors. And then there was a really well-preserved stage and theater in Tarrytown, New York. So it really came down to complex shot listing and storyboarding and figuring out exactly how to piece these 3 different locations, which were spread out, across the schedule in different locations, and how to do it successfully, with forced perspective, or even how we cut them from one scene to another. But we were able to put together that Versailles Opera House between those 3 different locations. We were very happy with it.
Yeah, and did you come up with that idea to kind of say, okay, we can amalgamate and take, multiple locations to make this happen? Or was that like, were you and the production designer kind of working together to?
Definitely always with the production designer. Mark Ricker is a fantastic production designer. Is sort of driven by the Baroque lobby in Jersey City, because none of these locations really had the scope and size of the real Versailles. So it was a matter, we built our own stage in that lobby, and then through forced perspective, we had images of Ewan McGregor and the other actors watching the different fashion shows on stage. And then later in the schedule, we went to an actual theater and then did the other coverage in the wings, or of all the models coming in and off the stage. And then, of course, with the mansion up in Yonkers, that was sort of all of the things that were going on behind the scenes for the fashion show, all the real drama between the different designers that were sort of jostling with each other for coming on first in the show.
Fantastic. It's so well done. And I'm finding more and more these days that TV is looking more like a feature film. And so it's, just so impressive to watch everything come together. And, like Mare of Easttown, New York City is a character in this project as well. So thank you so much, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll move right along to Matt Palmer for The Stand. Hi, Matt.
Hey, Meredith, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Oh, you finally got this project done.
I know.
I did some scouting for Matt when they were in the thick of it, and I just know firsthand that this was a difficult project with a lot of locations and a lot of logistics. So kudos to you and your team for bringing this to our TV screens, because it really comes together. So all your hard work has paid off.
Thanks.
So many of the locations are public, busy, like Gastown. And how did you convince the city of Vancouver to let you guys create kind of this post-apocalyptic world with garbage and bodies and, and just trying to minimize the, public interaction and trying to look for the right words. It's not ever, I think it must be hard to walk in and be like, okay, so we're gonna put some dead bodies over here and how did you make all of that happen?
Well, I think this show certainly is probably the most interesting backstory you could think of right in this time in history, because our show starts with a pandemic that wipes out the world. So we had to recreate everything that happened all the last year in a much different way, because of course in Stephen King's pandemic, it's a much more gory, gross, fast pandemic that within weeks, 8 billion people are dead. So I know there were some really unique challenges with the show, because the show was not told in a linear fashion. So we start with a story that the pandemic is just starting, but then as the episodes go, you're going back and forth in time. So you're creating things that are 8 months after the start of the story, where society is completely broken down, and there's no law and order, there's no nothing. And so people can the characters can do whatever they want in the show. If they want to go take a house, they go take a house. They have to get rid of the dead bodies. But, other than that, they can, if they want a car, they take it. Of course, so that was a challenge in itself, just in terms of the art direction, and try to create the consistency as we went through each episode of the timeline. where we were going into neighborhoods and asking people to not mow their lawns for weeks at a time in order to give that overgrown look. And plus we were telling a story that takes place over, I forget how many months, but we're shooting through the wintertime. So we started in green, and then of course leaves fell. So there's a lot of challenges in terms of trying to manage the look that way, and to find places that had to sub for so many different areas of the United States within a small geographic area of Metro Vancouver. One of the biggest sequences we did in the second episode takes place in New York City, and it's the escape of one of our main characters, Larry Underwood, out of New York City as the pandemic is wiping out the population. So we had to take 6 blocks of downtown Vancouver and turn it into a dead zone, essentially. So over 2 weekends, we had to get permission from the city, as well as all the businesses within those 6 blocks. We had to take down trolley lines for the buses. There was all sorts of things to try to find the exact right angles that could make downtown Vancouver look like New York City, which is not an easy task because, architecturally, there are some places where you can find some similarities, but you really have to work hard to find those exact spots. And we spent a lot of time walking the streets trying to find, okay, if we take this street and this street, and it just kind of, it kept expanding from what we originally found. And then the other challenge was it all had to be kind of anchored to these sewer tunnels that Larry Underwood and can't remember the other character's name. Anyways, that Rita had to escape down into to get away from these guys who are basically looking to take her and do horrible things. So we were working with the city in terms of trying to find sewers, and of course sewers are very difficult to go into just because of health and safety issues. We ended up finding one of the only telecommunication tunnels in downtown Vancouver that we could get access to that happened to be right in the middle of where we wanted to be anyway. So there was some good synchronicity there. So we basically had to plan our journey of these characters' escape through downtown on these 6 blocks. And it was quite the task. And we had to put out a news notice the day before we started filming, because we literally had dead bodies hanging from light towers, from the telephone poles, and there was cars all over the place, and all these dead bodies that were inside them. So it actually did hit the news. There were people who were stumbling across the site as we were filming, and were somewhat horrified. Some of it, what we were filming. So the permissions weren't really the challenge. It was really more the creative, because there's Vancouver's a very highly filmed city, so there's lots of things that are done. So it wasn't so much the permissions; it's more the planning of it. Once we figured out artistically where we needed to be, was really just the planning of notifications and making sure that everybody was aware, and all the signage, and building subway stations that we had to erect on street corners to make it feel like New York. So it was really, that was more the bigger challenge, was just creating a set that made it feel as authentic as possible to being in New York City. Because if we didn't sell that, really the series would not have been as believable. I think if you didn't believe that you were on the streets of New York, we would have lost all credibility. So I think that was a huge challenge.
I think you guys did a fantastic job doing that. So, and that you kind of already answered the second question, which was, what was the most challenging location? Do you think it was that New York City, trying to find that, or is there something?
Oddly enough, no. I mean, that was a big challenge, but I would say there were a couple of that were, we had so many. I did a count this morning of how many locations we had in our first 3 episodes, which was around 50. We had 240 sets overall in the series and 50 locations in the first 3 episodes. We had so many houses, and I think, houses are always such a challenge, because you're not just looking for a house, you're looking for something that is emblematic of the character. And in this story, because we were doing so many different geographic areas, it was trying to find houses that would feel like they were in that area. And so probably the biggest challenge was finding Franny's house and Harold's house in Algonquin, Maine, because Vancouver we're in the Pacific Northwest, and it's lots of fir trees, and there's just not many fir trees on the East Coast. So we looked for probably 6 weeks before we finally found the two Harold and Franny's house in Algonquin, Maine. And we were looking, and we probably looked in 6 different jurisdictions in the Lower Mainland, and I lost count of how many houses, well over 100 houses that we scouted for those two. And it was kind of a weird synchronicity again that, our scouts had felt like they had, the main area we were looking at was an area called Crescent Beach, which is right on the waterfront. We had been looking in there, and we'd had multiple scouts in there looking for houses. And after 5-6 weeks, they kind of felt, no, we've looked at everything we can look at. And I just felt, and I went to our designer, Aaron Hay, who was amazing. So I think there's still something to be found there. And so I went on Google Street View, and we were looking for something very, very specific in terms of the story and the geography of the house and the alley and a fence in the backyard where Franny has to bury her dad. And so there was just a lot of elements that had to come together for this house, and it had to look a certain way to fit into that Algonquin, Maine. And I went on to Street View, and I just started looking on the streets and looking at the alleys and the houses, and I plopped my man down in front of this house and was like, oh, and I called our scout, Courtney, who was amazing. I said, okay, go to this house right now, go knock on the door. And she did. And that was the house we ended up filming in, which oddly enough was owned by a woman who used to be a second AD in the movie business. And then from that, we found, I pointed her to a house on the next street over, and that became Harold's house. So it kind of set us up geographically, I think, really well visually for the story. I think Crescent Beach really sold the feel of being in Maine as opposed to being in the Pacific Northwest. And so I think that was certainly one of the many big challenges that we had.
Yeah, well, interesting. I love it when it comes together, but those 6 weeks getting there are nerve-wracking. But when you finally find it, it's so rewarding. It's like, yes, we've got it.
Oh, it sure was, because we looked at many houses. There were many that we looked at multiple times to say, well, how can we make this work? And we went with the showrunner, and he would go, well, it's close, but it's not really what we want. Like the geography inside the house with the doors was not in the way they wanted, or, there's so many specifics that you're trying to hit artistically to create that, what's in the showrunner and the director's head. And that can be sometimes the biggest challenge, is those small little details.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was really scary to watch, but amazing, because I doing locations myself, I often watch TV and go, oh, I know what that location manager had to do to make that happen. And so, it's one of those that I often thought, like, they put a lot of work into making that show happen. So thank you, Matt, and great job.
Thanks.
So we'll move on to David for Queen's Gambit.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. This was probably one of my favorite shows.
Yeah.
My husband doesn't watch TV, and this is a show that he got into watching with me. So we watched it, and he and I both just loved it. First question: did you play chess before?
Yes.
You did? Yeah.
Also my kids.
With my kids, yeah. We're chess players in our house, so I think
great.
that passion of watching her play chess and it kind of upped our ante, where we felt like, oh yeah, we've got to get better and know all of the moves and study it a bit more. So I think you made the world fall in love with chess.
Yeah.
First question is, how difficult was it? This TV series was filmed or takes place in a lot of different locations around the world, but predominantly it was filmed in Berlin. How did you find Paris, Moscow, Las Vegas? How did you go about finding these sets in Berlin?
actually these 3 locations was not so difficult because you know, we are in Europe. Moscow, we have the history of the GDR in Berlin. We had 2 parts of the city, so I feel very good with Moscow. I was sure that we will find great location, exterior and interior, and also Paris. I was thinking, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Also Paris, I was quite convinced that we'll find a great location for that as well. And Las Vegas was so crazy that I was sure, okay, we will find something because that will anyway some CGI work and we need a great location, but okay. But the rest was really challenging to sell an American audience, America, and that we have to find here in Berlin. It was like, wow, Jesus, how we can make that happen. And at the end, these locations was a difficult part because the director, Scott Frank, and the DOP, Stephen Meisner, everyone had an own experience from high school and how it looks in America. And to find these small locations, that was really tricky. And we came to a point that Uli, our designer, I'm working since more than 10 years together with him. He made the decision, okay, we can't get everything here. So it was clear we have to go to America or to Canada to do some exterior shots. For example, this house we shot in Toronto. So at the end, it was 1 week in Canada, and then we went to Berlin and find a lot of great interior locations. We haven't shot so many exterior stuff in Berlin, but the interior was really good. But challenging as well.
Yeah, sure. And can you talk a little bit about the work in Canada? I know Matt, we tried to get Matt on this call, but I think he had another obligation.
Yeah. Actually, I was not really involved in that. It was clear we did our research here in Berlin, and we tried very, very hard to find the exterior location, for example, for Wheatley's house here in Berlin. But at the end, we don't have the streets here. And if we have so many angles and so many scenes, we can't build that CGI. So it was clear we have to go there, and also for some downtown locations. So the decision was made, and then we moved to Canada, and we found there good scouts, but I was not really involved in that part of the show. And actually I was quite happy about that because we had so much to do. The prep was so short. I think at the end we had 8 weeks at all for the whole prep, which is, if you're talking about this kind of locations for the tournaments, for example, to find a place and the availability together with the cast availability was really challenging. I never spent so much time with the first AD to make that happen. It was really, really, really a big thing. And in the end, we were so happy that it was actually really good. And everyone was happy about that. And during the shooting times, what's not so clear that it will be such a big success worldwide. We were like, you're reading the books, the novel, okay, chess. The story is good, but no one expected such a big thing that comes out at the end.
Right. Right. So that's a bonus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was really the whole shoot, we were thinking, oh, do we get really away with that? Does that work? It was not so clear because we're not doing a portrait of that time. It was like, okay, we are creating a world.
Right.
You know, it was like Uli Harnisch, the designer. He's a great guy. He's a genius, but he creates his own world, which is not a documentary of real America. Like, for example, the Kentucky. Who knows where it looks in reality? But we found something, and it could tell the story. That was really impressive at the end.
Yeah, I felt really transported back in time.
Yeah.
With the locations, and until I started until I joined this panel, I didn't know that it was filmed in Berlin.
Yeah,
And
that's a big compliment.
yeah, I did not. So is there a location that you're most proud to have found in Berlin?
Sorry,
Is there, so many of the locations were incredible. Is there one that you were kind of most proud to have found in Berlin?
yeah, finding a location and getting this location really done is a different thing. But for example, the most challenging location was definitely the Mexico hotel, the big tournament, the second tournament. We were thinking about how to do Mexico and Berlin in general. Like, okay, I have no idea, but let's start to think, what can we do? There was written a zoo, and we had this pool scene. Of course, we found something. And then we were starting to think about the tournament. And there's one location I just mentioned, okay, this style would be perfect, but unfortunately we can't shoot there because it's just not possible. It's full booked, 365 days, 2 shows a day, and it's really massive. And it's booked out for 2 years in advance. It's really like busy. I was talking to the designer, and then he said 50 minutes later, oh, David, let's go there. That's a good idea. I told him, it's not possible. But then we find a way to reorganize some rehearsals. And there was one day just without a show because it was they had to do some work there, and we could sneak in. And that was really something, if I'm looking back, no one did that before. And I'm sure that will be a task if somebody is trying that again. But that was really great. And it looks good.
Yeah.
The Mariposa, the Mexican hotel is really something.
Yeah.
I'm really proud about that.
Yeah, you really felt like you were in Mexico. Like I honestly thought you guys went to all of those places until I started doing the research on the project. So
they dressed the whole place in 6 hours. We went in after a show, did all that overnight, bringing a techno crane and all the dressing built in an elevator in 6 hours. And then after the shooting day, out. This was like a big thing to organize.
A marathon. Yeah. Oh, congratulations. That's an accomplishment to get in and out, because normally everybody wants more time to load and more time, and I always find too, it's people have moved on to the next locations. They forget to come and remove their stuff. So you're calling departments saying, can you come get your whatever? So that's quite impressive. Well, thank you, David.
You're welcome.
So we'll move on to Underground Railroad. We'll start with Alison. Hi, Alison.
Hi.
This was just such a moving series, and I really felt transported back into time. And it's such a sensitive subject matter as well. So thanks for being here. And I heard that you were a bit hesitant to take on this project initially. What was it that made you decide to say yes and be the location manager for the series?
I did say no at first because I didn't want to do a slave project. I mean, I'm an African American. I felt I didn't know, I hadn't read the book. And so when it said the Underground Railroad, my first thought was Barry Jenkins. Oh my God, yeah, I'd love to. Then it was, the Underground Railroad. And I thought, well, I don't want to do a slave. I just didn't have I didn't think I had the constitution to do a slave project. But then the producer at the time told me, well, have you read the book? And she told me all about the book. And she told me to read the book and call her back. And as it happened, I was driving. I was already in Georgia. I was finishing a job in Savannah, and I was about to drive to Atlanta for the weekend. And so I started the audiobook, and that's about a 4-hour drive. I got about 4 hours in, and the book is outstanding. The book is just outstanding. And that's what changed my mind, because it wasn't, I mean, I've seen enough sort of slavery things, and it was nothing like the tip. I mean, there's not even Harriet Tubman. You say the Underground Railroad, your first thought is, here's a Harriet Tubman story. And she has nothing to do with it. And there really is a railroad. So that's what changed my mind, was reading the book.
And for this, I just doing a bit of research on the locations. You guys filmed in a lot of complicated locations, cotton fields, and I kind of read a little bit about that, you know, as film is, they want to film the cotton fields when cotton's not in season, or there's no cotton in that field, but they love that field, or
Right.
And, you know, you also filmed in the museum, the railway museum. And can you kind of pick one of those and talk about some of the challenges and rewards of working in these difficult, you know, locations?
Well, the Georgia State Railroad Museum was sort of critical. I don't want to say sort of, it was critical for our story, because we needed the trains and the track. In the story, there is an actual underground train that runs. And in order to get that look, we wanted real tracks and we wanted real trains. So what we wound up doing was building a giant tunnel. The art department, they nailed it. I mean, if you look at it, you would never know that was like a styrofoam tunnel. Like, it looks fantastic. But basically what we had to do was get a deal with the Railroad Museum, basically to shut them down. We shut them down during the month of August, because that was when they told us that would be the best time. You know, they have to run all the numbers as to when the busy season and all that, because at first they were like, no, we're not going to shut down. But ultimately we were building 250 feet of tunnel above ground on their trains, on their track. And we used a piece of track that isn't normal or normally used, but there's a lot of weddings that happen at that place. There's a lot of, you know, school groups that come there. There's a little tour that the kids take, you ride a little train around the place, and we were blocking that. So effectively we had to shut them down. And then Barry selected all these different trains that he wanted to actually use for the different pieces of the story. And, you know, it just became a massive thing. We had to prep it for a very long time, then shoot it, and then and get done. And the funny thing about the cotton, you know, I remember calling my father because we were trying to grow some cotton on the plantation. And I'm working with the art director about this cotton. And he's like, well, we need to grow, how do we grow cotton? And I'm calling all these farmers in Georgia, and they're telling me, you can't grow cotton right now. There's a season for cotton. And I'm in this whole sort of cotton growing thing. And I called my father and I said, can you believe that it is currently my job to try to figure out how to grow cotton? Of all the things somebody Black who's never spent any time in the South does not want to do, is get involved with cotton plantations and things like that. And I found out how to grow peanuts and everything else in the course of it. And it worked out, but it was a really interesting, movie people will be movie people. We ended up pushing a month, which helped us on our cotton, but literally it was those, we need to grow cotton in July. And they're like, it's not gonna happen. Like, I don't care what movie business you are, that is not when the cotton is going to be full grown. You just can't, just because you want it, you can't make it happen. Which was an interesting thing for, you know, movie folks. We think we can make anything happen, but not growing cotton at the wrong time. So
So interesting. Yeah. But I, never, I think I got caught in suspension of disbelief. Those cotton fields looked.
Well, we wound up, so the big cotton field, there's a big wide shot where you see everyone on the plantation. That's an actual cotton field that we shot at the right time when the cotton had grown. Where we were growing cotton, we did wind up growing cotton in the slave quarters, which was for episodes 1 and 10, when you're in the Georgia plantation. And so it's Georgia and Mabel, and you see the people picking cotton closer to the slave quarters. That's the cotton we grew, and we did get it grown, and we flipped the schedule and actually shot that in September so that we actually had the cotton available that we needed. So we shot the Railroad Museum, and then we went and shot the plantation, and were able to grow cotton in that area. But we also had to build a well and dig a well and put a deep well in to irrigate the cotton. It was a thing, but we did get it done. But there's 2 different areas where there's cotton. That big, massive, wide shot that's just beautiful with everyone out there is, in fact, they used that, I think, in one of the promos with Cora standing in the cotton field. But that's an actual cotton, cotton field commercial.
Yeah, and then I'm going to ask you one of Angie's questions as well, just because I think I'd like to hear your opinion. Is that, this was a passion project for Barry Jenkins, and took him years to get the script, to get the rights to the book, then write the script and bring this project to life. Did you feel a sense of responsibility to get it right, to help bring Barry's vision to life?
I've absolutely felt a sense of responsibility, but yes, to Barry, but more so to, I don't know, my ancestors, for lack of a better term. I mean, it's weird. It's weird anyway, in the movie business, most of the time, Black folks are the minority in the group. I've spent my whole career being like, in the old days, the only female and the only Black person in the scout band, and then you show up on Texas, that's normal. But when you're doing that on a project that is telling this complicated story of real history, but written as though it's not real. I mean, the truth is, the things that happen in the story really happen. They just happen at different times than, there were no skyscrapers and elevators at the time period that this thing was happening. Certainly there were no trains, but the testing that happened on the sterilization of women, and the testing that happened on the men, the things that happened during slavery, all the different sort of things that are tied into the story that seem crazy really happened, just maybe not all at the same time. So for me, you don't want to tell some crazy slavery story. And plus, people are sick of, I know I've been sick of slavery stories since Roots came out when I was in the 7th grade. So it's hard to get people, Black people in particular, often white Americans as well, because there's a pain associated with both sides. And so you don't want to get it wrong, and you want it to be beautiful. And Barry, everything he does is just beautiful. So it's going to be told properly. But it was, for me, a lot of my experiences were just, weird, and I was committed to getting it right. But there were plenty of days where I just went and drank bourbon because that's what I do. But because it was just painful when you sit and negotiate with some old Southerner who's telling you about how his family used to own these slaves, but how they were good to them. And you know, when you have to sit through those kind of conversations and listen to how the slaves were happy and the families were good to them and all that kind of stuff just to get the deals done, you know, it wears on you because you have to curb the natural responses. We're like, if you were so good to them, why don't you just free them? I don't know. But you don't get to say that when you're at work. We all have to be in circumstances where we watch our tongues politically or any other way. But it was very, very personal in this version because it was a slavery story. So I know I kind of rambled there, but all that to say, yes, I felt a very, very strong need to get everything right for many, many, many reasons.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think sometimes we forget that, you know, we are walking into people's homes or business, sometimes not even businesses, and they don't have the same viewpoint as us, and we have to put our personal beliefs and thoughts in our back pocket to make the show happen. Otherwise, we might not get that location. So yeah, that's something to recognize about this project, you know, especially working in the South in this current climate where we are having a polarized country, that people have different opinions. Yeah. Thank you, Alison.
Sure.
So Angie, we'll move on to you. Hi, Angie. Thanks for being so patient.
Of course.
Yeah. So you were scouting for the project, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So for each, for this project, each episode had a different title that kind of corresponded to a different state or different region. When you were scouting this out, how did you go about trying to find these different states or different areas within Georgia?
Well, I think that the reason Georgia gets used so much is Georgia's very versatile. You can make Georgia look like a lot of different things. And I think the fact that, you know, we had North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, you know, those are all southern, southeastern. So the landscape tended to be kind of similar. I think the biggest challenge was finding Indiana, which was, you know, we had to find, you know, open rolling hills. And so we actually ended up going a little further north for that. And, but yeah, it was finding Tennessee was, that ended up being a little challenging towards the end, just finding the right landscape as to what was scripted. But them being all kind of southeastern areas, it was, you know, but Georgia's really versatile. And so that's why we like to film here.
Yeah. How much time did you spend scouting for this project?
Oh man, I feel like it was like almost a year from like start to finish. So
yeah. And where are you based, in Atlanta?
Yes.
Okay.
I am.
You went everywhere.
I did. Yeah.
And then I'll ask you the same question I asked Alison. Given that this was a passion project for Barry, did you feel a responsibility to get it right, to find the most authentic locations?
Oh yeah, of course. So when I was first hired on it, they explained, you know, what the story was, and it was based on this novel. And of course, it was a very important story to tell. And Barry's version of the story was, you know, felt a huge responsibility towards that. Before I even knew that Barry was the director, I was told about the story and the content, and I took the job because, you know, it just sounded amazing. Then I was told that Barry was the director, which was doubly personal for me because my brother went to film school with Barry at Florida State. And so I took the job and then found out he was the director. And so it became very personal. I wanted to make him proud and my brother proud. And so it was, yeah, it's a very important story to tell, and I hope we told it well.
Yeah, I think it was told really beautifully, and it was, at first I was hesitant to watch it, just like you, Alison. It's something that bothers me, that's a part of, I'm American and Canadian, but part of American history, and so I think it was told really well, and I enjoyed watching it. So yeah, thank you guys. Does anybody have anything, last minute thoughts they want to add before we wrap it up?
I'd like to say that I've seen almost all of the other projects outside of the, I'm on The Stand. That one, I used to read all those Stephen King's, but everybody did. I just want to say kudos to everybody, because everybody nailed it. It makes me so proud to be in the same, to know this is what we do, and all over the world, everybody is just bringing their A game, and these shows look fantastic. So, congratulations to everybody in the group. And Matt, I'm working on The Stand. I'm like, man, that's my next one though. But I know you nailed it. I read the book. Now I have to watch the show.
I listened to the audiobook while I was working on it, which was 48 hours. But it was like, but it's anyways, yeah. It was very surreal, because we literally finished the week that the world went into lockdown was our last week of filming. Other than they had 4 days they were doing in Vegas, which got pushed, but it was very surreal. We were filming literally on the boardwalk in Steveston, doing some scenes from the start of the show with dead bodies and people in masks, and like it was just, and then a week later we were all just like, this is too weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll echo that. Kudos to everybody in this category. These projects are so incredibly well done. Locations are amazing, and you guys each, with the show's own challenges, really brought it to life. And I think one of the reasons that these shows were selected, and The Serpent, unfortunately, they weren't able to attend this call, was because you got lost as you watched these projects. You got lost, and the location was the character, and it was just so well done. So thank you guys, and good luck to you all. I think it's going to be hard for everybody to choose when they're voting. So thank you guys. Thank you for your time, and yeah, good luck.
Thanks. Congrats, everyone.
Congrats, everyone.
Yes, thank you.
Well, that wraps everything up for the Anthology Limited Series panel. We hope everybody enjoyed hearing what all of the location managers had to say. If you want more information, go to locationmanagers.org for information on this year's awards. Thanks so much.